We are back here again. It is Thursday. We have Think and Link, Pants Optional, which is a wonderful event that we invented in the last recession, in the financial recession, to give our friends a place to connect, and also because we're a curious crew. We call it Pants Optional because it's your option. We can do that nowadays. When we used to do it in the office, it wasn't pants optional, though some people have asked why not. That's their choice as well. We have some amazing things happening on this one today. As always, we like to push the boundaries and do things that perhaps make you uncomfortable. And we got an interesting exercise that Vikas is going to put us through. That's going to be fun and interactive. And interactive sounds like a 2000 word, not a modern 2020 word, but it is going to be interactive. And then, of course, we've got Alfredo, who is about 1,000% energy. And in an incredible role, an important role at MEDA. And you're going to hear more about that and what he's doing and how important that is for the rebuild of Minneapolis, the redesign of Minneapolis, the rethink of Minneapolis, whatever you want to call it. We are all, as we know, in a very interesting time. And it's a time when change happens in which we get to redesign systems and redesign things, and rethink how we look at the world, and become more self-aware, become more aware of our biases, the biases that exist in us every day, that we grow up with, based on our heritage or history or point of origin. And so we're gonna talk about that for sure in this conversation. But a minute for our sponsor, our primary sponsor, which is Capsule. We put this little event on because we're curious and because we have a firm here in Minneapolis that is the muscle that allows us to do this. And I'll have to tell you that we have an amazing lineup coming up in the next 2 months. We're trying to schedule out 2 months of speakers. Never done that before. This is kind of a fly-by-night organization. That is the Think and Link piece of it. The Capsule one, obviously not, because we've been around for 21 years. But that's enough of that on Capsule. I want to get into this in this conversation because we want to spend as much time with Vikas and Alfredo on this. Really fascinating. So I am going to hand it over to Vikas to do his introduction, and then Alfredo, and then we're going to do an exercise, I believe. Yes?
Yes.
Vikas, take it away.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for having me. Kelly, thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's great to be here. Yeah, I want to kick it off with a little exercise. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and show you what you're going to see when I send you a link. And it's just going to help us get our bearings on where we're at. I mean, we're living in pretty unusual times, a lot of stuff happening in our community and beyond. And so just want to do like a quick poll. And so I trust everyone can see my screen, and I'm going to send a link through the chat in a moment. And when you click on this link, you're going to be presented with 3 4-quadrant charts. Okay. And on each chart, there's a green dot and a blue dot. And the green dot is how you were feeling like before COVID hit. Did you prefer like working in the office wearing formal pants, or did you like working from home with, pants optional? Like, where were you on the spectrum? And then like, since COVID has hit, how has that changed for you? Like, now that you're forced to work from home, do you like it? Or are you like screaming to be back in the office in formal clothing? Like, where are you? Where were you before COVID? Where have you been since COVID? And so you'll put these dots on the place on the chart that represent how you're feeling. And you're going to do that for each of these charts. So you're going to find these dots in the upper left. And so on this one, I want to get a sense for where were you in terms of engagement and motivation before COVID and since COVID. And on this one, how has work been for you? Has it been playful and meaningful, or more monotonous and meaningless? And how has that shifted since COVID? And so when you're done moving those dots to the place that represent how you've been feeling, you can go ahead and click the submit button. And so you'll get a chance to see where you sit relative to everyone else who's on this call, and we'll kind of see how we are as a group. All right. So in a moment, I'm going to share this link. Here it comes. If you have any technical issues, just send me a message through chat. Okay, here it comes. There it is. And I'm going to keep an eye and see how the responses are doing.
And why don't we do a little bit of background, Vikas, on you? I want to,
Yeah,
because
sure.
you've been a speaker for Think and Link when it wasn't pants optional, and and then I want
Yes.
Alfredo to give his background as well. So he gives.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm an entrepreneur. I worked for a couple of startups for 15 years, went back to business school back in 2006 and got an idea for a business, which I call Keyhubs. And I've been working on that for over 10 years. And we specialize in creating cultural transparency inside organizations, uncovering the hidden relationship dynamics that exist between humans underneath the formal hierarchical structure. And we do that to help leaders understand where the true talent is in their organizations, to help them change more effectively, and create more cross-pollination across organizations so that they have better outcomes.
Thanks, Vikas.
Mm-hmm.
Little background, and then we'll jump into the exercise. Those of you that already have, keep going.
Yes.
Should I go now? Is that
Yes.
That's my cue. So hi everybody, Alfredo Martel, President CEO of MEDA. MEDA is short for the Metropolitan Economic Development Association. We are a mission-driven nonprofit, and what our mission fundamentally is to help BIPOC business entrepreneurs succeed. We do this with three key elements of our value proposition. The first one is management education. We do business consulting. The second one is money. We are what's called a community development financial institution. Think of us as a nonprofit mission-driven bank. And third is markets. We provide market access to contracts with large corporations like the ones we have in town, Target, Best Buy, Cargill. And we connect BIPOC entrepreneurs with those larger corporations for long-term sustainable contracts. I see some of our former clients in the audience, which is kind of super cool. And I've been on board since November 18th. So this conversation is going to be enlightening for me as well, because I've been now leading my organization longer in virtual mode than physical. So glad to be here.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you. Yeah, so I see responses coming in. Most of you have submitted. So take another 5 or 10 seconds to move your dots and hit the little submit button at the bottom of the charts. And I'm gonna, if you guys are okay with it, I'd like to kind of see where we stand and springboard into some conversation around that. Okay, so let's see how we're doing. Yeah, it looks like pretty much everyone has submitted. So what I'm gonna do is share my screen here. And we're gonna take a look at how we're all feeling since COVID. Okay, so I trust everyone can see my screen. Here is the first chart, right? So if we look at where we were before COVID, these are all of our individual responses. Most of us on the right-hand side, like liking working from the office. Some of us like the formal pants. Some of us, I guess, went to the office without pants. It's interesting. I mean, or at least preferred that. I don't know if that would go so well for HR, but I get it. You know, shorts, something like that. Yeah. And there's a few of us that, you know, preferred working from home and what have you. But for the most part, if we look at the average of where this group stands, it's, you know, not too formal, not too informal, but yeah, it's kind of nice getting out of the home and, you know, getting away from the kids and, you know, working at the office. You can focus. So how has that changed since COVID? So a little bit of a shift, right? I think once, well, one, people don't want to get COVID. So it's like, I'm going to stay at home, but there might also be this phenomenon of, wow, now that I don't have this 30-minute commute twice a day, I kind of like it. I kind of like not having to get out of my PJs or what have you. So this is something that we're seeing in many organizations, big and small, that once people have gotten this taste of working from home, being informal, you know, doing work more flexibly around the clock, anytime, that kind of flexibility is can be attractive once you've experienced that. So when we look at kind of where we were on average and where we are as a group since COVID, what we're seeing here is very consistent with what we're seeing in a lot of organizations. What we are seeing is generally it's non-leadership team members that are moving more into the upper left. What we found is that executives tend to like to be down here, and there has been some movement for executives, but not nearly as much for non-leadership team members. Okay, so that's that. Yep, sorry.
So pants optional seems to be trending.
It's
That's
trending.
A good sign. I think it's a good sign for us.
Yeah, I think it is a good sign for you guys.
Registered trademark.
Yeah, exactly. TM, pants optional, TM.
TM.
Exactly. So, okay, right. So let's look at engagement and motivation before COVID. So this is where we were. Most of us were pretty engaged and motivated. Some of us maybe not as much. And then, during COVID, this is also something that we've seen pretty consistent, is that engagement and motivation has taken a hit. If we look at the overall average of our group, we see this shift. And this is also very consistent with what we're seeing in a lot of teams and organizations that we've worked with. And if you look at the research around the impact of working remotely, this was research that was published in HBR, before any of the pandemic hit. What they found is that when employees don't have a choice of where they get to work, whether it be remotely or in the office, they tend to be less motivated. And right now, we don't have a lot of options of where we get to work. And then when they compared remote employees to employees working in the office, the remote employees tended to be less engaged and less motivated. And that's kind of understandable, because we thrive on connection. We thrive on learning from our colleagues. And when that's taken away from us, it's going to impact us. So this is also a trend that we're seeing here in our group. And that's very consistent with what we're seeing in the organization. But the good news is there's ways to combat this based on this HBR research, which I'll talk about in a second. But first, what I want to do is take a look at, is work meaningful? Is it playful? And how has that shifted? So if we look at before COVID, work was pretty playful. It was pretty meaningful. Some of us maybe not so much, but overall, if we look at the average, we're in this upper right quadrant. And if we look at since COVID, a little bit of a hit there as well. If we look at the average, let's see how we stand. Yeah, also same kind of thing. Work just isn't as playful because it's hard to do that playful stuff virtually. And so this is what we're seeing in the workplace, is what we're seeing here. And if leaders and organizations don't take the appropriate steps to mitigate this, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And so what the research suggests around how to combat this is really to inject more play and purpose into work, to create space for creative experimentation and meaningful problem solving. And so what the HBR research suggests is that regardless of whether or not you have a choice of where you work, regardless of whether you're working in the office or remotely, if you have space for creative experimentation, it's going to maintain high levels of engagement and motivation. So as we've been working and consulting with various organizations, showing them their data like this in a very short period of time, we've been encouraging them to brainstorm and think about ways that they can get creative about play, purpose, experimentation, even while we find ourselves in this very unusual situation.
Interesting.
Yeah, questions, comments?
Aaron, none of the capsule team that's attending today were the outliers in the note that's not meaningful to go to work, or let me just say that out loud.
Yeah, it's good that it's an anonymous.
Vikas, can I see the data on that? I'd like to see the.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's funny. That's fascinating. Really intriguing.
Actually,
that's cool.
Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
No, jump ahead. You have a question.
No, I had a question that's along the same lines. We're talking about connectivity, obviously, because you've talked about the power of social networks, and you've touched on this a little bit in your response to what we're seeing in these grids. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around this idea. You talked about informal networks and really how organizations and leaders can harness that power of, you know, social connections within their own teams. And again, you've mentioned a couple of ways that can happen, but can you share a little bit more about what you've seen, heard, recommendations?
For sure. Yeah, let's do another exercise. I'd like to engage everyone on another exercise, and then I'd love to speak to some of the things we've discovered around networks, some of the common patterns that we see, and things that I think organizations and leaders should be thinking about in terms of human connection inside the organization. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to share another link. And when you click on that link, you're going to be presented with a chart that looks like this. It's just a 1-quadrant chart with 2 axes. And on the y-axis, it's, you know, marketing expert. Are you a marketing expert, or do you see yourself as a marketing expert? And then on the x-axis, you know, way over here, it's, are you a Think and Link veteran? In other words, have you been to a bunch of these? Is this your first time? And so there's 2 dots. There's a yellow dot of where you think you are right now, and a green dot of where you'd like to be if different from where you are. So like when I think about myself, am I a marketing expert? I'd love to be, but I'm really not. I didn't get a degree in marketing. I haven't really been working in marketing. As an entrepreneur, I'd like to think I know about marketing, but I'm not a marketing expert. Am I a Think and Link veteran? I've been here twice, the 2 times I was invited to present. So I don't consider myself a veteran. So like I'm down here basically, but would I like to come to more Think and Links? Absolutely. Would I like to be more of a marketing expert? Yes, absolutely. That would probably help me in my business. So I, you know, basically place the dots where you see yourself, where you'd like to be along this spectrum, and then hit this next button. Okay. And I'm going to rate myself. That's pretty much where I stand, I think. And then you'll be presented with this like, hey, please wait while others, provide the rating, and then I'll instruct what's next. So I'm going to share this link in the chat. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Okay, give me a moment here. All right, here it comes. Here comes the link in the chat. Oh, oops, that's not it. Okay, there it is. Let me know if you have any technical issues. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep an eye on how these responses are coming in. Go ahead and put in your first and last name. That would be really helpful, because this is going to be like a 2-step process. We're going to self-assess, but then we're also going to provide feedback to people that we know on this call. Like you may not know anyone, but my guess is you are acquaintances or have a connection with 1 or more people on this call. Maybe there's a colleague here as well. So put in your first and last name. Should have made that more clear. I see responses coming in. Very good. Go ahead and hit the next button. I see people have done that. Awesome. Great. We're over 50% here. Just waiting for a couple more. Go ahead and take another 5-10 seconds to wrap up. Now, Aaron and Kelly, have you done this? I'd like you guys to do this. I don't see your names in here. Come on, you got to participate too.
I figured I would be all okay.
All right, I see Aaron in there. Kelly, okay, good. We'll just wait for Aaron and Kelly to put in their deal.
Social pressure, I'm in.
Okay, good. All right, so it looks like most everyone has submitted. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit a button on my end, and what's going to happen is the weighting is going to go back to the chart, and it should show you where your yellow and green dot is on the chart. But at the top of the chart, there's going to be a menu of everybody who's on this call, and basically a list of all the names. And basically what I want you to do is find a person that you know on this list, and when you click their name, it'll drop a blue dot on the chart with their name on it. Just random location. It's not putting the dot where they place themselves or anything like that. It's just random location. You can grab that blue dot, and basically what I want you to do is provide them an anonymous rating of where you think they are in terms of being a Think and Link veteran and marketing expert. And so what I want you to do is go through the list and pick the people you know, you're an acquaintance with, you have some impression about, you're connected to in some way. And so you might have 3 or 4 blue dots in different places on that chart. And when you're done, there'll be a submit button under the chart, and then we'll take it from there. Okay. So I'm going to hit a button on this end. All right. And now your screen should update in a moment. Your other screen, you know, where you did the dots, and you can begin providing feedback. And I see that people are already doing that. Excellent. I'm also going to go through this process because I know some people on this call. Who else do I know here?
Wow.
Okay, I think I've rated the people that I know on this call. So I'm going to hit submit. Now, when you hit submit, it'll say, please wait. And that's what you want to do, is wait while everyone submits their ratings of others. Okay, this is cool. I see the data coming in, and I'm excited to share what we find here. It looks like we're over 50% of the way through on submissions. We're waiting just for a few more. Take another 10 seconds and submit your responses. Looking pretty cool. Okay. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do, take another second or two and wrap up. And what I'm going to do is share these results, and we're going to have a little more deeper insight now into how we see ourselves in this group, and how we're connected to one another, and you know, how many marketing experts versus veteran, you know, thinking like veterans there are. So give me a moment here. I'm going to share my screen. And we'll just do this really quick. All right, so when we take a look at where we see ourselves as a group, this is how we self-rated. So there's no one here who claims to be a total marketing expert, so a decently humble group. Not even Aaron. I was thinking Aaron would definitely put himself as a marketing expert. And there's a range of thinking like veterans. There's some people like Aaron who've been here every time, and some of us that only come when we're invited to speak, which is pretty lame. So I apologize. I'm going to try and make it more often. And then when we look at where we'd like to be, obviously we want to be more of an expert, right? I think that's the nature of life. We want to grow, we want to get better. So when we look at the average of where we are and where we want to be, we see the delta. But then we also rated people that we know. And so this is how everyone was rated. When we look at all the different ratings of everyone, it's all over the map. And when we look at how our perception is, we're really giving other people more credit than we're giving ourselves, or we're just not, we're not, our perception is diluted, and we don't really know that people aren't coming here as much as they are, or something like that, or they are coming more than we think they are, what have you. So this is really powerful. And I have individual data, right, for everyone. Each of you have a unique profile, and I can reveal that in a moment, you know, where we can look at, let me do this here. You know, we can look at Aaron's profile and see, like, is he delusional? Is he aware about, you know, whether or not he's a marketing expert? Like, here's someone who's here and they think they're up here, and a lot of people think they're up here, but on average, not quite as high as they see themselves, right? And here's someone who's really humble. They see themselves down here, but everyone really pegged them up here, right? And I think this can be really powerful. But here's the thing about networks, right? So by doing this process, this real quick process, we can begin to understand how we are connected as a team, because we identified ourselves and then we identified others that we're connected to. And so real quickly, we can begin to understand how we're organized as a group. And this is independent of if we were a team, for example, working in an organization, this network is very much independent of the hierarchical structure. So what do we find here? There's two people who are key hubs in the network. My guess is this is Kelly and Aaron. We're all here because of them. They invited us, what have you. They're hubs in this network. I think that's important to know. This isn't always obvious inside organizations, because leaders like to think that I'm the person with the formal power. I've got the big salary. I've got the big title, whatever. But what we find in this work is that influence is often very independent of the title. So you might have someone who's highly influential here, but they're the administrative assistant, or maybe even the janitor. I mean, that's a little bit of an extreme case, but oftentimes these aren't the folks at the top. They carry a great deal of clout, but they don't necessarily have the title. And so leaders are often trying to drive change through a cascading effect through the hierarchy, and they don't understand that the person who's highly connected, highly inspirational, isn't on board with your vision. And so they sabotage the vision, or they resist the vision. And so culture essentially eats strategy for breakfast. Now, there's other things that we can see from this network. You can see there's a couple of people that aren't connected to Kelly and Aaron. Maybe they heard about this from a friend of a friend, or what have you. And so when we look at this, there are certain people who are more central, like part of the in-network, who are connected to Aaron and Kelly. I'm assuming this is Aaron and Kelly. Might be me, of course. No, I'm just kidding. But there's other people who are more on the periphery of the network. Like this person, these folks over here are not really connected to these folks over here. And that's a missed opportunity, because the people over here have knowledge, information, insight that could be useful to the people over here. So in general, what we find happening inside organizations is that birds of a feather flock together, not just in organizations, but in society. Like, you look like me, you think like me, I'm going to hang out with you. And inside organization, that plays out like you're in my department. Like, the marketing folks hang out with the marketing folks, the engineers hang out with the engineers, but there's a huge amount of benefit that can come from cross-pollination, and not just across departments, geographies, divisions, but across hierarchies. I mean, one of the things that we see inside organizations is that because of the layers of hierarchy, what we're finding is that leadership people hang out with leadership team, directors hang out with directors, managers with managers, but there's not like, and then you have influencers throughout the whole hierarchy, but they're not hanging out with each other, and they're not in line of sight of one another. The heads of the organization don't know who these influencers are. They're not tapping them on a regular basis. And so it's really hard to gain alignment and unity of vision. And so understanding influence, understanding connectivity, creating space and place for cross-pollination across divisions, across hierarchies, can go a long way in enhancing innovation, knowledge, friendship, which is huge. We're all wired for connection, and greater deal of cohesiveness. So what I'd love to do is just open up and say, like, looking at this network, what does it tell you about this Think and Link cohort? And how could this data inform how we operate differently? And I know we're already halfway through, and there's a lot of other things you guys want to talk about, and I don't want to dominate the conversation. But I wanted to give you all a taste of informal networks, and get you thinking about how you might want to show up differently in your organization.
I think this is Vikas. Yeah, it's really cool. Alfredo, I want to have you jump in as it relates to the Minneapolis community, and as it relates to what you do. And I also want to make sure you step back and tell the history of where the organization came from and why it exists, because this is, in a small way, a representation of what's going on in a community, right? Where people are connecting and trying to come together and figure out solutions. What are we going to do on the rebuild, on the redesign? Where is the power within those social networks, but also where are they most closely tied, right? Where the most influence can be obtained to create things. So I'm curious, just give a little bit of history of MEDA and why it exists. It's
well,
important.
At MEDA, we are focused on BIPOC business entrepreneurship, and we provide a recipe to ensure that someone who might have been marginalized from the network, actually, this is one of those really sweet kind of connective themes. In a simple way, I would say this. At MEDA, we bank the unbankable. You go to a mainstream bank, you don't know anybody there, you're not a depositor there, you don't have a network built with the manager or the vice president or the powers that be. You are one of those two dots out there, outside a network. MEDA and many organizations like us operate in that space and create, let's call it, a secondary network of support. One of the most important things that I see here is this opportunity to link the networks and link society in a way where folks that traditionally or normally might not have access to the information systems, the expertise, the competence that, frankly, this Zoom call has. Having that social capital be available to a minority business entrepreneur and link it through a digital platform is immense. It's immense. So Vika's exercise, really, I was taking notes because it has inspired me in terms of we're trying to make economic change, but socioeconomic change through these insights and through the energy that the moment has right now. We all know the current moment in where we're living is messy, it's scary, it's intimidating, it's inspiring, all those things. But being able to tap into this know-how of how networks operate and how technology can make them interlock and interconnect is extremely important to us at MEDA, because we're basically putting down big flags behind this. In our annual meeting yesterday, we talked about developing a virtual volunteer network. So timely conversation for us, because there's 27 MBAs and 5 PhDs of knowledge in this call. How do I harness that power and bring it to my clients and make them know what you know? So this is an exciting time, because it's not just about economic systems, it's now about competency, socioeconomic, social systems.
That's great. Yeah. Tangential to that, we were talking a little bit about this before the rest of the group jumped on the call. For both of you, and I saw the question pop up in the chat, leadership. Obviously, the roles and responsibilities have dramatically changed in the past few months. You're both leaders in your own right, obviously, if you're in organizations. And, you know, when we're thinking about how leaders in their teams are navigating, obviously, health concerns, you know, they're working remotely, they're supporting their families. Would love your thought and perspective on some of the key behaviors you've seen or that you actually practice yourselves that can help leaders manage effectively. Certainly now virtually, how do you manage through this digital world we're living in? So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. I mean, just to reiterate the point that I made at the beginning about the impact of working from home. You know, I remember in those first, few weeks of being in isolation and being forced to work from home, I really started to get kind of depressed, because I'm a little bit of an extrovert. I thrive on connection. I love going to the coffee shop. Even though I've been working from home for 10 years, I spent a lot of time out and about, and that was all of a sudden taken away from me. And I could see it start impacting my well-being. And so one of the things that really helped me move through it was this whole spirit of experimentation. I mean, much of what all of you have experienced with this tool that you got to experience is all brand spanking new, relatively brand spanking new. And I really went full force into experimenting with it in this kind of capacity, in a virtual capacity, and just started doing things that were new. I mean, in a sense, COVID forced all of us to pivot in different ways, but it also, it forces us to do things differently. And when we do things differently, like our brain grows, we try new things. So I just embraced the uncertainty of it and created more space for trying new things. And what that did is it got me excited, and it helped me forget about the negative effects of isolation. And so, a lot of the research that's being talked about the importance of experimentation, I internalize, I experienced. And so for me, I think it's reiterating what I said earlier, making sure that you're creating, even though it's hard and we're all busy and we all need to make a buck, really making time for play and fun and joy in whatever way that manifests for you. I think that's key.
Like it. Thanks, Vikas. Alfredo.
I like the initial commentary or the findings in terms of the difference between staff and executive. I thought that was a really interesting executive insight, because active listening and having sort of empathy with a capital E is becoming super important because of things like that. It's like, I want my office full of people, and I want every desk and every office with someone sitting there, because that's how I envision us being productive. And the world is changed. The world's not changed temporarily. The world is changed somewhat permanently. So having the ability to have that empathy and that ability to see that slide that Vikas just did is important. The other one is feedback mechanisms. I thought it was interesting how we rate ourselves and rate each other differently. That was like a really quick and insightful feedback mechanism. We're going to have to figure out how we give feedback to each other as well, because there's people walking around, to be totally honest, probably going like, I probably suck. I'm probably not doing a good job. I'm here at home wearing pajamas, so I'm probably pretty fireable. And maybe your boss is thinking, my God, you're knocking it out of the park and you're doing such a great job. And we've forgotten to give that feedback because we're still in a mental model that is not a virtual model. It's a old school brick and mortar model. So I take those two as big learnings from today. It's really eye-opening for me, at least.
Interesting.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So what is the game show going on behind you there, Alfredo? What is
Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Are you ready for this? Now, this is the graphic design from our annual meeting, which took place yesterday. It was a virtual meeting. So I love the design. It's very energetic. It's very optimistic, and it's very very positive, and there's a little bit of playfulness to it. So, the theme for our organization is we are ready for this. And in our theme, one of the things that connects us, again, Vikas and I, is that as a new CEO who happens by accident, and I saw a question on the chat about this, who happens to have been leading virtually now longer than physical than in person, our strategy was founded on digitizing all of our services for expansion and scale. And so when I see this conversation in terms of culture, networks, entrepreneurship, there's vast interrelations that need to be built in our organization to make our vision a reality. We are going to be the national go-to center for BIPOC-owned business entrepreneurs. And we're going to do that through technology and through digitally distributed systems and networks. So the guy like right here next to me, I think, very important.
Yeah. Actually, Alfredo and Vikas, you started to talk about this, Alfredo, but some of the stories that maybe even came out of your discussions yesterday, annual meeting, but some of those inspiring stories, pardon me, that you're hearing, through our community and otherwise. I mean, let's talk about some inspirational things that are happening. One of which you share with us, Alfredo. I'd love for you to share.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it again interconnects to networks. And you're going to be surprised when you hear this. In the middle of the civic unrest and all that was rightfully so happening with regards to the killing of George Floyd, we are, of course, very focused on helping our businesses and our clients as they're having issues with either fire, looting, arson, whatever, damage to their business, disruption of their businesses. In the middle of that whole thing, a high school kid from the St. Paul Academy, which you can understand, the St. Paul Academy, white kid, privilege, named Alec Ratson, was watching everything that was going on around his city, and he, as a young person, wanted to do something about it. And he took it upon himself to build a GoFundMe page for MEDA, for us. He didn't call us. He didn't talk to anybody. He didn't ask permission. He just went up and did it. And he linked the GoFundMe page to our bank account and then tapped his entire network. And he raised $36,000 in 30 days through the power of his network and the fact that he knew how to deal as a digital native. He knew how to tap into digital networks. And so for us, we got a lesson in digital, B2C or B2 donor philanthropy from a high school kid from St. Paul Academy. Alec Ratson will be at our all-staff meeting next week. We're going to probably mortify him with praise. You know how teenagers are.
Mm-hmm.
But a remarkable story.
Yeah, amazing. And he had no previous connection to the organization prior.
I'm sorry?
He had no previous connection to the organization.
No, he looked us up. I mean, I'm telling you, he Googled us up. Yeah. He Googled 7 different organizations in the Twin Cities, and he went, okay, these guys have a super solid track record. We do have a really good reputation. Mm-hmm. And he just went up and did it. So
that's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like he schooled you. He schooled you on what can be done.
Oh, trust me, our chief development officer was a little embarrassed.
That is impressive.
Right?
Quite happy to be so. Yeah. Just to be clear. Quite happy to be so.
Very, very happy with that. Yeah. Wow. That is impressive.
It is indeed.
Love that.
Vikas, what have you seen, heard that's been inspiring for you? Oh, let's unmute you.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I think it's what everyone has seen and heard. I think there was a lot of horror and disgust and, fear when Minneapolis went up in flames for the whole world to see. But then immediately following all that, just like people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, cleaning up, feeding families, coming together. I think that was a real testament of the heart and soul of our community. Yeah, we're not perfect, but we're also really good people overall and want to make things better. And I think those stories were super inspiring and uplifting. And as we were talking with each other before this call started, just like all the beautiful art and murals that plastered our city, the beauty that came out of the anguish, as Aaron said, I think all that speaks to the resilience and the good-heartedness of our city, our people. I'm very hopeful.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Yeah, it is. I was going to share, I wasn't sure if I was going to share this story, but I grew up in a Japanese design firm that you all might know already, but Yamamoto Moss. So one of my biggest influences in starting this venture was Hideki Yamamoto. And we spent a lot of time together. There was times when he would say, you as Minnesotans, you think you're very diverse, you think you're very, accepting and all other things, but you're not at all. He can be pretty much knew every Japanese person in town, right? He also said, you're just not. And the other point he made at some point in time was, you're not really considering diversity. You're not really considering other people of color until they become your boss. So the migration of people from Hong Kong to some Canadian cities like Vancouver, all of a sudden you turn around and your boss is Chinese. Maybe I'm going to have a different perspective on the world, right? It's that behavioral economics conversation of understanding, diversity from your own lens, right? I grew up in a primarily white small town as well, halfway there and halfway in that neighborhood in Minneapolis. That was where I rode my bike around. And so I didn't really see it. I was blind to it to a certain degree, living in that environment. But when you have something like this happen, it holds up a mirror to yourself, and everybody should, your biases that are going on, right? And that everybody can do just a little bit more to see people. So, Kelly, do you have another question? Because I don't. I'm focused on.
It's really this is a softball broad question, but in the entrepreneurial spirit, we have several entrepreneurs, I would say, on the call with us today. What advice would you give to would-be entrepreneurs, young, mid-career, that are making that shift? And then, how does certainly the unprecedented times we're in now, how does that impact? I mean, do you see the impact how should we shift a mindset when pursuing an entrepreneurial endeavor? Any thoughts on that?
You want me to go first?
Either one.
Go ahead, Alfredo. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because it's the same. I'll give the same answer that I gave at the panel yesterday, which is the entrepreneurial spirit. And I have a very good friend on the call that I keep seeing her on the gallery, and I want to shout out to Janice. I see you. Yeah, that's right. The entrepreneurial spirit is very much so rooted in the individual and the individual's energy and passion for a dream, right? So it's very much so a trap to sometimes end up in me, I, right? And so right now we're in really uncharted territory. We have the US government throwing trillions of dollars in stimulus packages, somewhat haphazardly and discoordinated, if you follow it. Clearly missing the point on minority businesses, and the trickle-down economics are not working. So that's where we come in. So we have a really challenging economic environment, a really challenging socioeconomic environment. And in the middle of all this, you have to be a dad or a mom, a husband or a wife, an entrepreneur, a strategist, an accountant, balance the checkbook. It's a lot for one person. It's a lot to take on, and it can make you feel depressed, overwhelmed, confused. So first thing I would say is seek help. Seek someone that's doing it right, that's doing it well, and ask how they're doing it. Get support. That's the first M in our recipe: management support, management education. Get help in doing it better than you're doing it on your own. Second is, of course, I'd say to everybody, if you qualify for any stimulus package right now, if you qualify for any grant, take it. Take it, take it, take it. Worry about repaying all that stuff later. Trust me, the US government's gonna do something here. They're just gonna do a lot of forgivable grants and loans. And then third, network, which is why this was such an interesting think and link for me, because we're seeing a lot of businesses retooling on the fly right now. I'll give you an example. We have a client, Du Nord, who used to be a distillery. And I say used to be. And they make great gin, great vodka, great spirits. And in the middle of the whole pandemic, they have shifted. And now what they're putting in the bottles is actually hand sanitizer, right? They're making more money as a sanitizer company than what they were doing as a distillery. So their business model was able to retool their equipment, their capabilities, what they do at their fundamental: alcohol in a bottle, different type of alcohol in the same bottle. And they've retooled. And so business entrepreneurship and small businesses is where the innovation is coming, is where it always happens, right? The big corporations, yes, are important, and they carry the Dow Jones and all that stuff. but the real economy and the economy of agility is at this level. And so this is the economy that I care about, and in particular our BIPOC clients. So that's what I would say. I think there is hope, there is help. Don't feel you have to do it all by yourself. Leverage what Vikas has shown us, networks.
Thank you. That's great advice.
Yeah, I would echo that, Alfredo. Very, very nice. Very beautiful. Yeah. For me, as an entrepreneur, my message is always the same. The longer I've been in it, and it's the same for entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs. And I think it's what Steve Jobs said. It's really Steve Jobs' wisdom, which applies to someone like him of his stature, and to people like me who's small business owner. And that is you got to follow your heart. You have to follow the love, because no matter what journey you embark on, it's going to be really hard. And if you don't love it, you're going to quit. These are his words, and it's so true. So love, joy, listening to your intuition and your heart is the high order bid. And, I just think about all the confusing messaging that we're getting around COVID, and, the polarization that we're seeing in our country during this time. It's probably an all-time high. I think it's so important for us to go into our heart and to listen to our own inner guide, whether that be in our work and what we want to do from a work perspective or entrepreneurial perspective, and how we lead our lives, because that's our real true inner compass. And that's helped me over these last 10 years. And I'm going to continue to rely on that. And I'd encourage everyone else to do similar if you're not already.
Good.
Yes.
Love that.
Inspired.
Yeah. I before this call, I got off a call with our chocolate client, Scott, who Kelly knows very well. And he's an inspired character. You hang out with him and just he's energy. He's pure positive energy to hang out with. And he's an optimist. And yeah, if there's anything you need in entrepreneurship, it's optimism, right? And you see everything that happened during that time period, and it's horrifying to watch all the video, all the footage of everything that was going on. But you want to get back to optimism and see the positive that we can rebuild, right? It's a testament to Minneapolis and St. Paul and what we are. It's very positive. There's great potential here, and we can redesign this. So for everyone here, I hope that you can bring Vikas into your organization and connect with him and help him build his business and connect him into your community. And of course, MEDA and Alfredo, wherever you can connect him and increase his network. He has an incredible one because of all the respect and his history and where he came from and what he's done, but that he can always advance that and improve that and connect with more people, right? So we can do more, we can lend more, we can offer more advice. The other piece that I keep thinking about is our soap client down in Hastings, Nebraska. And the way he looks at things and what they do in Africa and how they help, and he looks at it as just access to market, access to opportunity. That's what we need to provide, right? And that opportunity might just be connecting with someone else, right? Having a conversation, giving some positive advice, giving some praise. And to the capsule team, you're all doing great. Just so you know, you guys are doing exceptionally well. Back on that point of praise, which we try to do as much as we can. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for attending, for hanging out with us, for doing this, for this exercise, and for two absolutely amazing guests, for inspiring us in a conversation about how we're going to redesign and rebuild our city. Also put a plug in for next week. We are going oat milk and cereal. We have Post and we have Oatly, which is going to be fascinating. A couple of interesting characters coming onto the stage next week. Any other last words, Kelly or our guests? Other thoughts?
I actually have a last question. We've been asking this of our speakers the last couple of weeks, and I'm putting both on the spot, so if you don't have a response, it's okay. But favorite book or movie that you've read or seen recently that you can share with the group, whether it's inspiring, nonfiction, fictional, documentary, any takeaway with us? Okay.
Well, I have an all-time favorite. All-time favorite movie is Forrest Gump, and I recently wrote a blog about it. You can check it out on my website.
I saw that.
I love that movie. Love him. And then favorite book of all time is a book you probably haven't heard of. It's called the Urantia book. I'll write it in here if anyone is curious. I've been reading it for many years. Urantia book. Check it out. Let me know if you want to start a book club around it.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Alfredo, anything you want to share?
I would just say I'm going to choose a book that is all about Vika's statement about culture eats strategy for lunch, which is The Dream Manager. Look it up. It's all about that. It's about empathy with your coworkers and empathy with your employees, and how as a leader you have the privilege to help them build their dreams. That's the role of a true leader. In terms of movies, I just spent vacation with my family in the Black Hills of South Dakota, taking a look at Mount Rushmore and the Crazy Horse Monument that's being built, and enjoying that. And so we took all the kids back home and we did a marathon of American heritage movies. So we watched Last of the Mohicans, Dances with Wolves. There's a third one in there that I can't recall right now. And we would point out the mistakes and we would point out some of the issues, like that's not true and it's not that great there. But in general, our younger generation suddenly saw an entire different side of American history that they had no idea. Mm-hmm. So exposing them to that was beautiful. I thought it was particularly funny when they saw Dances with Wolves and then said, well, there weren't that many bison over there at the Badlands. I'm like, that's a problem.
Accurate.
That's the problem. So anyway, that's that. Shameless plug. If you guys are looking for something to do this weekend and you like beer, the Lab Tap Room in St. Paul just launched Black is Beautiful IPA. All proceeds go to, you bet, MEDA. So if you like beer like me, that's right, I see you. The Lab Tap Room in St. Paul, Black is Beautiful. All proceeds go to MEDA. Buy one and then drink 4 more.
There you go. Like it.
That was a good adjustment. I like that. That was good.
There you go. I was going to say, first round's on me. You buy the other 5. But
there's a lot of people here.
That's okay. That's okay. The math works.
It does. Good point.
I love that.
Yeah. Vikas, Alfredo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Gentlemen. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to everyone else for joining.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.